kids have the same issues as adults, but have little ability to protect themselves. So they're more vulnerable.
So if you have a child who's injured because of someone else's negligence, how do you get help? And is it different from an adult injury? Well, we're going to find out right now, because that's what we're going to. Ask the Lawyer. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com. My guest is Alaska attorney Mark Choate. I want to remind you right off the top, if you want to ask Mark questions about your specific situation, just go to AskTheLawyers.com. Click the button up at the top right-hand corner of the screen that says Ask a Lawyer, and you can ask away right there. Mark, it's good to see you again. As always, thank you for helping us out today.
Great to see you this morning.
So let's just talk about child injuries and how those are different. First of all, are these cases similar? Have you handled cases like these before with childhood injuries?
I've represented hundreds of kids over the years who've been injured. Unfortunately, a number of them have been killed, and I've represented the states and their families. So I have a lot of familiarity with childhood injuries, and they are different than adult injuries.
First of all, what are some of the more common injuries that you've seen that children suffer that might be, cause for somebody to call you?
I would say that the ones that sort of stand out are injuries when kids are hit on their bicycles, hit in crosswalks, going to school, hit because they're just smaller. People aren't looking out for them. They may be, panic, not have always the best judgment because they're kids. And so you see that those sorts of injuries. You also see, kids just injured like adults in the sense that they're in car crashes or they have, those types of injuries. And then you see injuries that are specific to children, which is where adults take advantage of them. Sexual molestation, some bullying, either by adults or by classmates, things like that. So all those areas, kids have the same issues as adults, but have little ability to protect themselves. So they're more vulnerable.
Sure. Let's talk. You mentioned that it is different than, say, an adult injury case. What are some of the differences? What do we need to know about that?
Well, the biggest issue with kids is always that they're somewhat dependent upon their parents or guardian to bring the claim. So there are a lot of kids who are injured, and the parents just don't ever think about, well, gee, what are going to be the long-term consequences of this injury? And do I need a lawyer? Will my child need services in the future? So you get, times where there's a brain injury, they're injured and, they fall on playground equipment or they are hurt in a sport at school. And the natural tendency for everyone is to want to get better and to believe things will be better. It's especially the case with kids. We don't want to think that our children have a long-term injury. So there's a little bit of denial that can occur and a lot of frustration because no one ever helps a parent figure this out. They wander looking for some resources and people will say, well, Billy's acting differently or Judy's acting differently, but it's probably just because of, this was a stressful event. Well, they might have a brain injury or they might have a trauma from a psychological trauma. And as we think about our lives, we think about the things that stay with us from our childhoods. It's not the broken bones. It's the broken hearts. It's a time where we felt betrayed.
Is it also the case, Mark, where just a child's inability to maybe be able to express or communicate the way an adult would, does that make it more difficult too?
It's a big issue. It's a big issue because especially, infants and babies are not verbal. Another thing that happens is that children will shut out trauma in the sense that they will kind of push it back so it doesn't overwhelm them. So you can have your own sort of psychological protections and blocking. Kids aren't as good at communicators. And frequently there's, especially when you've been harmed by somebody in power, they'll be there. Well, don't believe that child, that child is not trustworthy. That child has other motives. And people often are, the nature of people in power who abuse children is that they're very good at directing attention away from themselves to anybody else. So those are all issues that kids have.
Let's talk about specifically in Alaska, if a minor child does recover some sort of damages, some sort of recovery, what happens with that money? How's that handled there?
I think in every state that I'm aware of, the child does just not get the money. All court rules now require that money that is recovered for a minor, and that's somebody under 18 or somebody perhaps with an ongoing disability to where they've got a guardian or a conservator, meaning somebody managing their financial affairs. Those monies have to be generally put into some kind of account, and they can only be spent in certain ways. Frequently, the parents will manage that account, and the account will require that there be, if you can use it for medical expenses, or you can use it for travel for medical expenses, or you can use it for education. But there'll be limits on it because there's a history of unfortunately parents, sometimes for bad motives, spending their kids' money, and other times because they're not good at money management, and other times we're going to lose the house if we don't take this money, none of which are acceptable. It's the kids' money, and it has to be preserved and protected. So that happens on every place I know, and often nowadays the children, like in Washington, I have some cases down there. On any minor settlement, the child will be appointed their own attorney to assure that just for purposes of the management of the money, that money is going to be managed correctly.
What's your advice to parents when they're trying to pick the right attorney to help them with a childhood injury case? What's your advice? How do they choose the right lawyer, Mark?
It's tough. It's a hard one. The tendency, I think, is to go to the firm which you hear the most about because they spend a lot of money on, advertising or on a big internet presence. Those firms can often not be good because I call them mills. They kind of take a lot of cases in and they settle them quickly and cheaply. Childhood injuries, by their nature, because they often, children are young, a permanent injury for a child can last 70, 80 years. So you need to have lawyers that know what they're doing. And so I think it requires, doing some research. I wouldn't necessarily call friends. I would look for the Trial Lawyers Association in any state that you're in. Every state has a trial lawyers group, and they'll have some way to access the members. And generally speaking, lawyers that are involved in those groups who make it the profession to bring cases for injured people and participate in the sorts of things at the state and national level, which advance and push for the rights of injured people and their children. Those are lawyers that are going to be good for you. There's always differences, but you want to avoid the mills.
Mark, as always, very helpful information. It's always interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for making some time to answer our questions.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been Alaska attorney Mark Choate. I want to remind you, if you'd like to ask Mark some questions about your specific situation, it's easy to do. Hit up askthelawyer.com. There's a button in the upper right-hand corner that says Ask a Lawyer, and you can start right there. It doesn't cost you anything to ask. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with Ask the Lawyers.